This is my new computer, my new rig. Pretty cool if I say so myself. But that's not what we're talking about here today. We had some crazy changes to the schedule, and Texas actually turned out to be a pretty decent race. Let's get into it. This is Final Analysis. What is happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of Final Analysis. Not going to be much editing on this one. Just wanted to kind of get this done and over with, because I got a lot of stuff to do. So, first, let's get into the schedule and some of the changes that were made. The schedule received quite possibly the biggest shakeup that I have ever seen on this schedule. After the Daytona 500, they're going to go right into the West Coast swing, which makes sense. And they pushed Atlanta back to March, the 5th race of the year, which I thought was a pretty good move. But they've moved Homestead from the final race of the year all the way up to the 6th race of the year, because they're making ISM Raceway the season finale for next year. I'm not really sure how to feel about that one. But without a doubt, the two biggest changes to the schedule was making Indianapolis the July 4th weekend and Daytona the season finale, the regular season finale. That's not going to make a whole hell of a lot of people happy, I'll tell you that much right now. And then you have the Southern 500 as the Chase cutoff race, or actually starting the playoff, I should say. And you have Bristol in the playoff now, which is quite the change. It's now going to be the cutoff for the first round. And Martinsville is going to have a Saturday night short track race on Mother's Day weekend. And they're also going to be the penultimate race of the season, meaning they're the cutoff race for the round of 8, which is pretty cool. But without a doubt, the biggest change that they made was Pocono. They're going to be making Pocono a double header weekend. Lol, what? The only thing that we really don't know about when it comes to the Pocono races is whether or not they're going to be 400-mile races, or if they're going to run one race on the triangle and the other on the road course. Of course, the latter, which would be pretty cool. But, yeah, the 2020 schedule has caused quite the stir in the NASCAR world and in the motorsports world, because it is quite literally the biggest shakeup that has happened to this Cup schedule in a long time. So, and it kind of makes you wonder if this is a sign of things to come for 2021, when all bets are off. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into the review. Not even going to bother going into the truck and Xfinity Series races, because Kyle Busch won them both, and that's all you really need to know. So, excuse me. So getting into this, Jimmy Johnson started this race from the pole. Had actually a pretty fast car all throughout this weekend. So stages 1 and 2 were 85 laps, and stage 3, 164 laps. So here we go. Just going to let me know that this is going to be a more positive review than I thought it would be, considering Texas Motor Speedway's history. But there will be some nitpicks here and there. So, Jimmy leads lap number 1. Suarez and Elliott start fighting for third, which turns into a 5-car battle for second, with the 41, the 22, the 24, the 11, and the 9. Logano and Suarez start fighting hard for fourth. We get our first caution of the day on lap 14 when Eric Jones spins in turn 2, but no contact. Half the field comes down pit road for service. Johnson leads on the restart. Logano gets by Elliott for second. Kyle Busch goes 3 wide with Blaney and Hamlin. Suarez gets by Larson for fifth. And then we have Johnson, Logano, Elliott, and Austin Dillon in a four-way fight for the lead. So early on here, I'm thinking, wow, this race has actually been pretty good so far. Elliott to the outside of Logano for second, which was a pretty good move. The top 10 are within 2.5 seconds of each other after 30 laps. So, needless to say, I think it's safe to say that the aero package, it definitely improved the racing at Texas. Because, I mean, this is some of the most competitive racing that I've seen at this track ever, as far as the Cup Series is concerned. Logano gets back around Elliott for second. Logano has a look underneath at Johnson in turn 1, but can't complete the pass. Johnson pits from the lead on lap 60. Denny Hamlin gets nabbed for speeding on pit road, first of 2 penalties. And of course, he would overcome both of those penalties. William Byron trying to stretch the fuel mileage, but has to finally come in on lap 80. Logano cycles to the lead late. Alex Bowman basically cooked it into the pit lane and got a commitment line violation. Joey Logano wins stage 1, and Ryan Preece runs out of gas. So, pretty solid first stage, I must admit. So most of the field comes in for service. Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon take just 2 tires, and Elliott the first off with 4 tires. Tires didn't really mean a whole lot in this race. In fact, it seemed like the older they are, the better they were. So there was a lot of 2-tire and fuel strategies going on during this race. So Ricky Stenhouse is penalized for a crewman over the wall too soon. Keselowski has to go to the garage at the beginning of stage 2 with possible drivetrain issues. Martin Truex Jr. leads on the start on the start stage 2. The first 6 cars stayed out, so they didn't pit under the stage break. Kyle Busch decides to do his best Dale Earnhardt impersonation by trying to do a pass in the grass, going 3 wide with his brother Kurt and Kevin Harvick down the front stretch. A couple laps later, Kurt tried to repay the favor on his brother down the back stretch, and Harvick ended up being the one who pulled out of that. I was like, we finally get our first pure lead change on lap 99 when Kyle Busch takes the lead from his teammate. Top 6 in a bit of a conga line and within a second of each other, so nobody was getting away from each other. It seemed like that they were having a little bit of trouble trying to execute passes, but they were all right there within each other, and they were juking and jiving and all this other good stuff. Elliott and Truex fight for second with 4 others in tow. Elliott would be able to get up to second, and then he would be able to run down Kyle Busch and take the lead for our second pure lead change of the day on lap 110. Logano passes Truex for third in the quad oval. Logano and Kyle Busch start fighting hard for second halfway through stage 2, and Logano finally clears him with 42 to go in the second stage. Kurt Busch kicks off green flag pit stops on lap 138. Chase Elliott pits from the lead and almost loses it coming into the pit lane. And then we have a caution come out in the middle of the green flag pit cycle, which catches a lot of guys a lap down. And this was our second caution on lap 149. Kyle Larson loses the right front tire and pounds the outside wall in turn 2. And like I said, this caught a lot of guys a lap down. There were only 10 cars on the lead lap at this point. And they all come down for service. Hamlin only takes fuel, which was a bit unusual. Joey Logano gets penalized for an uncontrolled tire. We'll come back to that particular penalty in a minute. Not the Joey Logano one, but the uncontrolled tire stuff. We'll come back to that here in a minute. Hamlin leads on the restart. Hamlin holds Kyle Busch at bay. Blaney and Suarez battle for third. Logano's hood started buffeting really bad, like it had a broken brace underneath. and it was just moving up and down, which was a little bit of a hazard because, I mean, that could have flown off at any point. Blaney gets by Kyle Busch for second. Suarez gets around Kyle for third. And Denny Hamlin ends up winning stage number 2. And at this point, I'm like, so far this race has been surprisingly decent. I'm honestly very surprised. Pleasantly surprised, though. Because last thing I wanted was for this to be a boring-ass race. You know, I wanted at least something, you know, to, you know, I just wanted this race to be enjoyable. And for the most part, that's what we got. But there are a couple of nitpicks, like this one. On the stage break pit stops, Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick were penalized for uncontrolled tires. So apparently, the guy who is within an arm's length has to be the one that's able to carry the tire. I don't know what NASCAR is smoking, but this their definition of uncontrolled tire nowadays is absolutely stupid. I mean, the tire could just be sitting there. I mean, yeah, it's not being controlled by anyone, but it's not, you know, bouncing all over the place. And if it's in, like, the pit box or somewhere in the vicinity of it, why should that be considered a penalty? I mean, that is such a ticky-tacky penalty, and they called that on a number of occasions. And even some of the announcers in the booth, they were basically just, you know, expressing their displeasure for it too. I mean, it's a ticky-tacky penalty, and honestly, their definition of what constitutes an uncontrolled tire is quite frankly dumb. It's absolutely stupid, and they need to change it because it makes them look like complete and total dumbasses. I mean, I don't know who came up with the definition for that rule, but they need to be smacked upside the head. Because they were lacking some common sense on that one. So Blaney leads the start of stage number 3. We had Suarez and Menard fighting for second. Menard was looking pretty good here. Suarez begins running down Blaney in a hurry. I mean, he was catching him at a fast pace. We had side-by-side racing throughout the field, so that was cool to see. Menard, unfortunately, has to pit for a tire vibration, which turned out to be a loose wheel. Then you had the 24, the 6, the 10, the 1, and the 19 all battling for position in the bottom half of the top 10. That was basically 6th through 10th, and they were all right there together and fighting for basically 6th through 10th. Kurt Busch also has to pit an unscheduled pit stop. This time he actually had a tire coming apart, so he got lucky on that one. Blaney pits from the lead with 116 laps to go, but unfortunately he would have to go back down pit road, and he would go out of the race with an engine failure. I mean, I tell you, Blaney, he has been fast a lot of times, but he just has some terrible luck. Because he had a fast car in this race, and he certainly had a car that I think would have been good enough to win, and he goes out with an engine failure. I mean, he just has some crap luck right now. Kyle Busch leads by 7 seconds with 100 laps to go. Of course, this was in the middle of, like, a bunch of different pit cycles and everybody on different pit schedules and all that other jazz. So Busch pits from the lead with 96 laps to go. That hands the lead to Suarez. But Kyle Busch starts catching Suarez for the lead, and he eventually makes the pass on lap number 245 for our third pure lead change. And we actually had 5 in this race, so I was like, okay. And then our third and final caution happened on lap 255 when Daniel Hemrick spins in turns 1 and 2 because he had a right rear tire that went flat, probably from contact. Everyone, except for a few cars coming for service, Kyle Busch, Jimmy Johnson, and Denny Hamlin take just fuel. Eric Almirola, Eric Jones, and Chase Elliott decided to stay out and forego the pit stop. Because they realized that at this point, it didn't matter at one point they would pit, they would still have to come down pit road for one more stop. But what these teams decided to do on those pit stops would end up shaking out who would ultimately win this race, as I'll tell you in a minute. So Eric Almirola leads on the restart, final restart of the day. Eric Jones takes over the lead on the outside, but it was no pure lead change because it was the lap after the restart. Kyle Busch begins challenging Jones for the lead. Then you had some smoke coming out of the 3 car, which it looked like a tire rub. Then we had our 4th pure lead change on lap 265 when Kyle Busch gets around Eric Jones. Jones was actually hanging with Busch for the time being, and then we would have our 5th pure lead change on lap 273 when Kyle Busch gets really loose in turns 2, nearly loses it. Somehow held on, but he would lose the lead to Jones and would actually drop back into the 4th position. But the top 5 were all right there together, though. And then Kyle Busch has to pit with 53 laps to go after smacking the wall off turn 2, and the handling of the car was never the same, so his shot at the complete sweep is over with. Thank God. I got really sick. I mean, I'm telling you, I got so freaking sick and tired of NASCAR and Fox just completely, deep-throating Kyle Busch's dick and balls. It's like, seriously, get off his knob. It's getting extremely old at this point. We get that he's a great driver. You don't have to shove it down our friggin' throats every goddamn week. It's ridiculous. But anywho, Almirola gets under Hamlin for 2nd, but can't complete the pass. Jones starts actually pulling away from Hamlin. And you have Suarez and Newman fighting for the 8th position. Jones pits from the lead with 31 laps to go and actually takes 2 right side tires. But that would ultimately cost him the race at the end. Bowyer starts charging hard towards the front, like really quick. I mean, his car was dynamite at the end of this race. Bowyer starts catching Hamlin for the lead with 20 laps to go. I mean, he got down to under a second, so he was coming quickly. Bowyer pits with 16 laps to go for fuel. Hamlin pits from the lead with 15 to go for just fuel. And Hamlin actually had a better pit stop than Bowyer, and actually came out with a 2.5 second lead. Austin Dillon was the last to come down pit road with 12 laps to go. But Hamlin cycles back around to the lead, like I said, with a 2.5 second lead with 10 laps to go. And at that point, it was like, well, GG. And Denny Hamlin wins the O'Reilly Auto Parts 500 despite a pit road speeding penalty and an uncontrolled tire penalty, and missing pit road on one occasion. So he had to overcome a lot of different issues in this race, but still ends up in victory lane. Gotta give him props. I mean, he went through almost every adversity you could think of that you could throw at him, and he still somehow comes back and takes the win. And after going completely winless in 2018, he has won 2 of the first 7 races. So, not a bad effort. And it was his 33rd career win. So, I think it's pretty obvious at this point that I think Hamlin is probably going to be safe in his ride. And, of course, he still has the FedEx sponsorship. Of course, with word coming around that Christopher Bell is most certainly going to be moving up to Cup next year. I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, who's going to move over, for Christopher Bell? Well, it's most certainly not going to be Kyle Busch. I mean, that part is obvious. I mean, he just signed a contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing, and Interstate Batteries became the latest sponsor of his to sign an extension themselves after Mars did their contract extension with them as well. So Kyle Busch is not going anywhere. I think it's safe to say Denny Hamlin's not going anywhere because, of course, he got his 2nd win of the season. He won the Daytona 500, and he's got the FedEx sponsorship. So Hamlin's not going anywhere. I don't think Truex is, because this is his first year with the team, and he's still in the prime of his career. He's been close. He hasn't won yet this year, but he's been pretty good this year. I mean, Texas, he seemed a little bit off, but for the most part, they've been running really good this year. So it seems like the odd man out is going to be Eric Jones, unfortunately. And he had a chance to really raise his stock up a little bit. It's just that circumstances didn't really work out. They decided to take 2 tires, and that ultimately cost them the race because he actually ended up finishing 4th. So that was a tough break. So overall, the finish was a bit of a dud because after the pit stop cycled out, Hamlin got out with the lead, and he had a 2.5-second lead. Bowyer tried to cut into it, but he wasn't able to catch back up with him. But I am going to say this. Overall, looking at the race as a whole, without a shadow of a doubt, this was one of the best Cup Series races I've ever seen at Texas Motor Speedway. Because, you know, you would think that, well, how could they make a track this bad worse? They lowered the banking in turn 1 and 2 and widened it out a little bit. So they just completely made the track even more broken than it already was. So its only saving grace was this new race package that seemed to do quite well at Las Vegas and at Atlanta. Didn't really do so well at California. But I think it's safe to say that today's race was actually pretty damn solid. Had a decent number of lead changes, only 3 caution flags, lots of competitive racing. I mean, honestly, this race was alright. You know, and that's despite the fact that Texas Motor Speedway is typically garbage. So, overall, this was actually an alright race. And I'm very pleasantly surprised. So my final rating for the 2019 O'Reilly Auto Parts 500 at Texas, I don't know. I think it's right there with Martinsville. And it definitely has the advantage in the lead change department. So I'm going to go ahead and give, I can't believe I'm going to do this. But I'm going to give the O'Reilly Auto Parts 500 a solid 6 out of 10. Yes, you heard me correctly. A 6 out of 10. It was actually a solid race, and I am very pleasantly surprised by it. So, that's pretty much going to do it. Not going to be doing any editing on the video this week because I got a lot of other videos to get done. I got to catch up a little bit with Green Gold Games since I didn't release any videos for Green Gold Games last week, but I got, of course, with this new computer, it's going to make things a lot easier as far as getting gameplay footage up. And I need to backlog some episodes anyways, because I got a huge project involving Fallout New Vegas coming up soon, so lots of fun things. And I still have to edit the next episode of Flea Market Hunter 2, so I'm busy as all hell right now, so not going to really be much editing with this episode of Final Analysis. So, but this is basically the uncut version, and hey, I didn't feel the need to cuss today, so there you go. Well, at least not all that much. At least not the bleepable words like, you know, the S word and the F word. So there is that. So that's pretty much going to do it. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out.